Good evening, everyone. This is my video on how to filter water and how my activity went. So first off, I had a lot of engineering fails. Originally my idea had these little sticks that held up the cups, but what ended up happening was it became too top heavy and just flung aquarium rocks all over my kitchen. So I put that away and went back to it the next day. Where I created a second tower that was too cluttered and didn't drain fast enough and ended up creating puddles. This is a picture of just the small puddle that I created, but it actually went over the entire table and part of my floor during parent-teacher conferences. Okay, so for my towers, you guys can see this first one had the largest grain down to the finest grain, being the paper bags down at the bottom. Whereas this one, I went with more of a researched approach where I combined different materials into what I believed was the best way to describe them based on what each of the different layers were. No matter what, the bottom was one of these glass mason jar containers. So, first off, how did I decide which ones, how they were going to look? So for the first trial, I thought the small cups would be great because it would have allowed for more trials to take place, but it fell due to instability. My second one, my students actually decided how they were going to do this, and they decided in their small groups how it would go, and the overall class just decided that they wanted to do the biggest thing on the top and the smallest thing on the bottom. Ended up having too many layers, and it drained very, very slowly and eventually spilled over. The third trial, I combined research materials with layers of composition of the soil. I found that the humus was most like the rocks and cloth and cheesecloth because it's the debris that's on the top. Topsoil was most like charcoal. Subsoil, because it's a smaller grain, was like sand, silt, or clay, so I made the sand layer for the subsoil. And for the fragmented rock, it said that it could be finer than sand, so I made my paper towels and coffee filter down at the bottom. And for the very, very bottom, the bedrock was similar to my mason jar because it caught the water. I found that it drained a lot more quickly, which surprised me from trial 2, and it had a higher percent yield of water, which was something that I was incredibly interested in. As you can see, my starting water up here was very murky and very dirty. I actually got it out of the Yellow Breeches Creek right near my house. You can see, compared from the end to the start was very dirty and the end was very clean. And if you want to look down here at the bottom, this was my first trial, over here all the way on the right. The middle one was my third trial, and this was the original water. You can see how much more water, when I added the same amount, was in the second trial or the third trial than the second trial. On the terms of inquiry, I felt that learners were kind of given what they were supposed to figure out. How to build their thing, but they were given a lot of freedom in how they did it. They decided what was evidence and what they were testing. They decided what formulas to use and how to summarize. They worked independently to find the resources that they needed to come up with how they were going to order it. And they had to communicate and justify what they were doing and why they did it the way they did, leaning to a much more learner-directed than teacher-guided. Thank you.